welcome to this meeting of the North and East Plans Panel. My name is Councillor Javed Akhtar and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind that today's meeting is being live streamed on Leeds City Council YouTube channel, so the public can observe the minute without needing to be present. North and East Plan deals with the applications from north and northeast of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel to make their decision. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you have introduced yourselves. So if I could start from the left, Steve.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Wilkinson. I'm the case officer for this plan application. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Andrew Fosbury. I'm the Senior Highways Development Control Engineer.
Robert Allison, Principal Engineer in Development Control in Flood Risk Management. Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Councillor Jim McKenna, and I'm a Narmley Ward member.
I'm Councillor Michael Miller. I'm member for Kippax and Methley Ward.
Councillor Ray Jones. I'm the councillor for Horsforth.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Holmes and I'm part of the PANS panel team.
Good afternoon, Ryan Stevenson, a Harewood Ward councillor.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, Debbie Oldham, Governance Services and Clerk to the Committee.
Philippa Plumtree-Varley, Principal Legal Officer and Legal Advisor to the panel this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Hello, my name is David Newbury. I'm the Lead Planning Officer for the Plans panel.
Thank you, everyone. Moving to the agenda, could I ask the clerk to go through agenda item 1 to 5, please, when you're ready. In the meantime, I would also like to welcome our 2 new members, Michael and Ray, for joining this panel, and welcome to the Leeds City Council as well. Congratulations on your election. And also, this is our first municipal plans meeting, which is taking place this afternoon. So I welcome you all, even though it's not the same panel what was last year, other than Barry and Stevenson, but the rest of them, and David, in fact. But thank you to our 3 new members, and including a new member, which she should be joining us shortly. So items 1 to 5, please. Oh, she's here now, Jewel. It's okay.
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press or the public. Agenda item 3, there are no late items of business that I'm aware of. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interest they may have? And I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Councillor Sharp. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of February 2023. Do members accept these minutes are true and correct record? I'll assume correct unless indicated otherwise. Are members happy to move these? Thank you. Are there any matters arising? No, thank you. Item 7, Steve, you'll take the lead on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start with a couple of updates. So since the publication of the report, there's been an additional 10 letters of objection. Those letters of objection largely raise issues which have already been covered within the report. One of them mentioned contamination issues. You'll see in the report that we've had comments from the contamination officer who's recommended conditions should the development go ahead. And that includes what to do if contamination is found during the works. And secondly, there was concerns raised about the state of the footpath link, in particular the existing footpath which we looked at on site today, and members have walked that up and down to the gate, so they know what standard that footpath is up to at this present time. So yeah, so in addition to those 10 letters of objection, there's also been a letter of objection received from Councillor Stables, who's a new member in Wetherby Ward, and I'll just read that out because it's a short representation. So Councillor Stables has written, I'd like to formally register my objection to this plan application. I completely agree with all the points put forward by the ward members, and that was their letter, which I've referred to in the report dated November 22, and should like to particularly highlight the concern in regards to road safety. The site Inquisition is situated off a country road, the first section of which has no pavement and is a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit. Anyone staying at the site will have to walk down this part of the road to access the village, or just to go for a walk. I would imagine at some point in their stay, they are very likely to want to explore the neighbourhood that they are staying in by foot. And then vehicles use Hall Park Road as a regular cut through to the Thorpe Arch estate, and speeding is common, even through the village of Walton, where there's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I'm extremely concerned that visitors staying in the glamping pods who are unfamiliar with the site, road and village will be put at risk when walking down Hall Park Road in either direction. So moving on from that, there's just an additional condition that we're recommending. So you'll note within the reports, within the residential amenity section, that the applicants are proposing some CCTV. So we're just wanting to add a condition requiring the details of that CCTV, if it's on columns or where it's going to be attached. And then further on the site visits today, there was a question raised to us about disabled access, and we have had a chance to speak to the accessibility officer on this issue. In general, tourism developments and hotels, we apply Part M of the building regulations, and that usually expects 1 in 20 rooms to meet that standard. So essentially on a development like this, it'd be reasonable to expect one of the units to be accessible and meet that Part M. So we have managed to have a chat with the applicant, and they're amenable to make this change if requested. Moving on, can we move on to the presentation? Have I got access now? There we go. Right, so the proposals for change of use of land for the siting of 8 glamping units for holiday use, and that includes a storage building and ancillary works, including a new access road. And the site is it's a field, so land off Hall Park Road in Walton. So the red line there shows the application site boundary, so that's got 2 spurs. The one going to the southeast is to provide the access from Hall Park Road, and the spur to the west is to provide an access onto the footpath that runs towards the western part of the site. And the blue line indicates the wider land ownership of the applicant, so they've got control of the adjacent fields to the west and the south as well. So moving on to the proposals. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so moving on to the proposals, this generally shows the site layout. So there's 8 glamping pods, which are I'll show you which they are. So they're like the rectangular outlines up at this top part here. So there's 5 along the northwest part of the site, and the other 3 are located on the southeast of that site. There's also a car park for the users that's got 11 spaces, You'll note the access road to the southeast across the field, and that's going to be tarmacked for the first 20 metres. And after that, it uses a grass stabilisation product. So that's like a grid which is put in, and then that can be seeded. It just provides extra stability for the ground going over there. And then we've also got a bin store and site storage, which are located just to the east of the car park. I'll just highlight those now. And the footpath link to the west, that just runs along here, and the footpath runs down here towards the village. And then as part of the proposals, there's also substantial landscaping. So that includes a wildflower area, mixed native wheat planting, the planting of new large native trees, as well as small native trees as well. So just moving on to the design of a glamping pod. So these are called amphipods, and the 3 meters in height, 3 meters wide, and 7.3 meters in depth, this model. And essentially they're clad in a treated timber to the outside, and the ends are a metal which can be painted any colour. So we've put a condition on requiring the final details of that colour, but it's expected it'll be a green or brown to blend in with the canopies of the trees. And this is a site storage building, which is it's akin to a standard timber shed. And this is just a cross section showing how the amphipods might sit against the enhanced landscape proposals. So you can see that the site's already quite well screened by mature vegetation to the edges, but this will be enhanced by new tree planting and wheat planting as well, which will provide further screening from the key public viewpoints. This scheme highlights the drainage. So essentially all 8 units for the grey water and the foul will be drained to a pumping station, which then connects to the public sewer at a point to be agreed at a later time. Now, for context, this is a location of a site where I put the red cross there. So it's a field that's set back about 90 metres from Hall Park Road. It's well screened by the existing mature vegetation along the edges. The next one gives the context of a site in relation to the village of Walton. So the village of Walton lies to the southwest there. Just for clarity, I'll highlight where the edge of the conservation area goes now. So it lies some 300 metres from the edge of the conservation area. Just goes there, and that line forms the edge of the urban area, and beyond there, the land is classed as rural land. So that's like a countryside designation. It's not green belts. That's restricted to all the land south of the River Wharfe, but it's within the rural land area, which is protected by policy RL1 of the UDP. And then this is just a wider context. So again, the site is in the top right corner there with a red cross, but it just shows its location adjacent to Walton. You've got 4 Parks Trading Estate to the south. You've got some housing development to the south of Walton. You've got Boston Spa along the south edge of the map there. And you can see the edge of Wetherby to the west. So that just gives you the wider geographical context for the site. And this is a photo from Hall Park Road looking towards the site. So the glamping units go beyond that row of trees and vegetation, which is beyond the initial hedge at the roadside. So the second row along there. So it's set 90 metres back, and that the access road would go through the existing clearing between two of the trees there. This is a further zoomed in look at the sites from Hall Park Road. This is looking westwards along Hall Park Road towards the village of Walton. So you can see the nearest house there on the edge of Walton. For members who are on the site visit today, that's the house whose garden we went into today. So just in terms of the wider context, so that there's a policy within the neighbourhood plan which requires key views to be retained, and one of those is the key view of the spire. Now you can just see the spire above some of the trees. I'll try and highlight it in 1 second. There. And this is looking eastwards, so this road extends towards the edge of the Leeds administrative boundary, which then borders Selby, which is about 800 metres away as a crow flies. And you can see there that the road at this location is rural in character with grass verges. Then you've got the hedge, which provides the front boundary of the site. This is the access, the footpath which runs to the west, which the site's going to provide access to. Now it's blocked off at that point now where you can see the fence, and the footpath link would just come in just before that fence across the public right of way there, and then provide access to the site that way. And then this footpath provides access into the village of Walton. So if you follow that route down, it then connects to the footpaths which we walked along today. And this is the access point with Hall Park Road. So if you were to just step a little bit further back, there's a footpath that runs across there, and that runs into Walton. And this is a segment from the neighbourhood plan. So this is the key view plan, and this is the long range views which they're seeking to protect. So in the northeast corner there, you've got one from Hall Park Road, which seeks to protect the views of the church. And essentially that cuts across the first field where the access roads go in. And, as we look further, into the design of the amphipods, they're going to be behind that cover, and we don't think it's going to affect those key views, but that's just there for context, showing where some of these key views are. So in terms of the main issues, I mean, there's a lot of issues covered within the reports. It looks at the impact on the countryside, and we come to the conclusion that small scale tourism within the countryside setting, can help to support rural economies and is acceptable in principle. And given a combination of its low density layout, setback from main viewpoints, the low number of glamping units, and the mitigation measures such as the design and the potential to include dark recessive colours in the design of the amphipods, plus the landscaping enhancements, we don't think that the glamping site's going to be too conspicuous within that wider countryside setting. In terms of the impact on neighbours, it's a small scale glamping development which isn't likely to be a significant noise generator. The applicants have also sought to limit the potential noise generation by setting the development away from the residential units. So if you just look at this map here, the residential properties down in the southwest, the south of that plan there, and the actual glamping units are set as far as they can be away in that field. The application was also supported by a noise impact assessment, which concluded that the development wouldn't give rise to any unacceptable noise nuisance. So in terms of there's biodiversity as well. Sorry, can we just bring that plan back up? Sorry, I clicked off too quickly. So we've obviously got the existing mature tree cover around the site, which is going to be retained, and that's going to be enhanced through a new landscaping scheme, which is quite significant levels of new planting to be provided alongside this proposal. And that will result in the biodiversity net gain, which will be secured by a planning condition. And also, when we were on site today, we noted the off-site pond, which is known to have great crested newts. And from comments from our ecology officer and what the applicants are putting forward, we're going to improve that habitat for the newts, and that will be secured by a planning condition. And the applicants will need to liaise with Natural England because it requires a license to work with newt mitigation. In terms of highways, there's been some concerns raised regarding the footpath link to the west. A wider footpath link is shown on our definitive public rights of way map, which extends from Walton to Bickerton. Obviously, from that picture, you saw that it's been closed off at a point just to the north of the site. So essentially, the footpath is a claimed path at the moment, but it's been in use for a number of years, and we had free access to walk up there today. And the presence of that footpath link means that people then don't have to walk along Hall Park Road, which could be dangerous given the speed of traffic, the grass verges that make you walk on the highway for some parts. And then in terms of drainage, we've received a large number of representations from local residents and members in relation to drainage, and they highlight particular problems within the village, particularly in relation to sewerage. The applicants have looked at lots of different options to resolve these issues through the application, which has been going on a number of years now. And it's proposed that the technical details for drainage will be secured by a planning condition. And as you'll have read within the report, this approach is supported by Supreme Court case law. These conditions will essentially require a feasibility study to determine the connection for foul sewerage, the capacity of the sewers, and any improvement works required in their timescales. So ultimately, the development won't be able to commence until that condition is discharged, and if a drainage solution cannot be found, this will prevent the development from going ahead. We've also been liaising with Yorkshire Water through and our drainage expert, one of whom is here today. And Yorkshire Water raised no objections and have recommended the development goes ahead subject to planning conditions. So whilst we understand it's frustrating not having all these details at this moment in time, we don't feel we have justification to depart from the Supreme Court case law in this instance. And then one final point, you'll be aware that Walton has a neighbourhood plan, and through the report we've assessed the development against the neighbourhood plan as well as the wider development plan policies, and we think that this development complies with the neighbourhood plan and indeed draws support from one of the policies which supports new businesses and enterprise in the rural areas. So overall, we think the development complies with the development plan as a whole, and it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions at the start of the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before we bring the objectors or the members of the public, can I ask David to just cover up some of the points you wanted to cover up? Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Just picking up on a point that was raised on the panel site visit, that members indicated that they'd have some questions about the public right of way and asked that a public rights of way officer, if possible, attend. We have tried to contact the relevant officer, but unfortunately they're currently on leave, so they're obviously not able to attend. And just to give you the full picture in terms of the access, when the application originally came in, which is some little while ago, we did consult with the access officer, and we didn't actually receive a reply. And that's not a criticism of the access officer, because we received such a volume of applications, it's not possible for them to give us a reply on everything that we've received, on every application that we've received. But we're very grateful. Two points: one, for members for raising it and drawing our attention, because it slipped past planning officers, and secondly, very grateful for the access officer to come up and give a consultation response and further advice, or some advice, so quickly during the lunchtime period. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. In accordance with our protocol for public speaking at the plans panel, we have speakers in objection to the proposal. So if you can come to the front table, please, and when you're ready to speak, you got 4 minutes between 3 of you, and that will be Mr. Johnson, Mr. Robinson, and Councillor Lamb.
Good afternoon, Chairman and panel members. It's unusual not to be at that side of the table, but our new Chief Whip unceremoniously kicked me off the panel, so I'm in the cheap seats today. But it's good to be with you, and welcome to the new members. I'll introduce my two colleagues in a second. I'm going to speak very briefly at this stage, and happy to answer any questions. We've heard the recommendation from officers. There are a number of inaccuracies in the report and in what's just been presented to you, which need to be addressed. But the clear principles for me are: this is not a sustainable location. We've seen and heard it's not an accessible location in any respect. It doesn't meet the core strategy accessibility standards. The bus service is every hour, and it's about 20-minute walk to get to the bus service. It's not accessible to people with visual impairments, with disabilities. We're effectively saying, as the planning officer confirmed at the site visit, those people are not catered for in this development, which is not acceptable to me. There are all manner of things wrong with it. This is a community which is one of the most forward-thinking, proactive in the city. Their neighbourhood plan is award-winning in conjunction with Holbeck, and they've actively gone out of their way to promote additional development over and above what's required by the city local plan, and they should be applauded for that. They've also identified and said that this site is not suitable for development in that process. So I'll hand over to my colleagues Chris and Phil, who will add some colour to that.
Walton is a quiet rural village in a conservation area with approximately 100 dwellings and a population of 200. It lies immediately adjacent to Thorpe Arch Village, which has a thriving trading estate and a recently built 195 unit housing estate. This is a rapidly expanding community. To date, however, no mitigating traffic measures have been put in place. In 2019, our neighbourhood plan was completed. It was compiled after many well-attended village meetings, and the plan was made by Leeds Council, who supported us with active involvement in our team. Together, we agreed the plan. We consciously sought to support the Leeds ambitions on housing by achieving a commitment for a 23% increase in our own village housing. We are well on the way to delivering this. Together with you, we came first in a national award scheme for Best Neighbourhood Plan, with representatives from Walton, Leeds and Holbeck went to London to receive the award. We make 3 points. First, the plan requires that no dwellings should proceed along Hall Park Road unless and until the sewage disposal and associated draining arrangements are significantly improved. Alternatively, off-grid arrangements must be put in place. That was a stipulation agreed with Leeds Council and Yorkshire Water. To now accept this particular planning application without an independent disposal system would be at complete odds to that stipulation. To proceed will significantly raise the frequency of overflows of sewage both onto the road and into gardens on Hall Park Road, thereby increasing health and safety risks. It is unclear how Leeds Council can now be considering to reverse this health and safety requirement. Phil will say some more.
The current road configuration in this area is dangerous, and recognising this, highways have agreed to install traffic calming measures to reduce the risks. They had promised to have these measures in place by September 22. To date, there'd been no visible progress on this implementation. Hall Park Road is already dangerous. Any further traffic and pedestrian activity will increase this danger. There are no public footpaths in the area. Along the roadside, there's no footpath at all, often not even a verge. Local residents do not walk along Hall Park Road. Chris.
Third, there are ecological reasons to support our neighbourhood plan view of these fields. They are part of the Leeds Habitat Network.
It's okay. You can finish your sentence, sir.
Okay. This area is of particular ecological importance to the local wildlife.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Now I will invite members if they have any questions to the speakers, but may I just remind members that only specifically what's before us and is what the speaker have just said, rather than asking the speakers, is there anything that you have missed? Can you understand? So I just want to be absolutely straight. And I think Councillor Lam understands. Normally Councillor Lam asks this question on beginning, is there anything else? And then the whole chapters opens, so specifically on this particular item and anything the speakers have said, and you want to ask them questions. Thank you.
Right, just got a number of points. We've heard in the presentation beforehand, but you didn't clarify the footpath ownership, the dispute that you've got a view, the council have a different view. If you could further on that. Then when you've answered that, I've got a number of other questions. If we can take them through one by one. So if you can, first of all, the footpath ownership, can you just clarify that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, and I note the chair's comments, respect that. One thing I was surprised that was omitted from the officer presentation was a late objection received from the owner of the footpath, which wasn't read out. So it's extremely short, if you'd be happy with me to read it out, which is that the owners, John Rich, we strongly object to this development. One of the main concerns is the use of the lane, which is very narrow and often used by farm vehicles and tractors. The right of way is only their existing gate. The lane is owned by ourselves beyond the access gate to the land in question. There are no rights of way over any of our land. The rest of the lane is private property. We do not wish it to be used by anyone else, pedestrians, as we feel this would be very dangerous with the big machinery turning on the lane for the field. There's a few other comments, but it is absolutely disputed that there's a public right of way across that.
You have a copy of the agenda that we've got today, the report. If you can go to paragraph 43, which talks about paragraph 84 of the NPPF. Right, you mentioned that the development wasn't sustainable. So in terms of paragraph, well, the NPPF paragraph 84, subparagraph A and D.
Councillor Anderson, if you can let us know which page it is as well.
Well,
so
on page 27 or 9, depending on which. It's got two numbers on the bottom. 27 is the one in the bottom middle, and 9 is the one in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so in terms of paragraph 84, subparagraphs A and D, bearing in mind your comments about sustainability, do you feel that the NPPF is going to be met in respect of what you've said and what we're meant to be guarding it against?
No is the short answer. The expansion for that is it refers to the growth and expansion of all types of businesses. What isn't in the report is that the existing business has been kicked off the land, which has been farmed by the same family for 50 years. And for hundreds of years before that, they have been unceremoniously evicted from their farming business. So what we're saying is we're destroying a business to start a new one. That does not, in my view, meet the requirements of the MPPF.
Go to paragraph 44, about chapter 9 of the MPPF, which talks about promoting sustainable transport. Do you feel that that part has been met?
No, absolutely not. Again, if you take sustainability in the round and accessibility in the round, one is, what does the core strategy say? You should have access to a 15-minute frequency service to major settlements. That isn't there. And in terms of sustainability and accessibility for all people, there is no provision in this application to make it accessible for people in every circumstance. Indeed, on the site visit, the officer confirmed that there's no expectation people with disabilities, visual impairments, any other manner of disabilities would be expected to use these facilities. That makes it unsustainable and inaccessible.
Yeah, right. The next one is the one of the things we often come across is consultation with local residents. Has the applicant consulted and worked with local residents to enable them to reach a compromise, maybe not acceptance, but at least a compromise position that everybody can live with?
There's not been one visit. There's not been any contact with the parish council. There was a pre-application visit, which a couple of locals, I was one because I saw people in the field, saw the applicant. We pointed out some of the inadequacies of the site, like no water supply, despite what is being said in various points, no electricity. We asked about how things like bedding would be sorted out. Hadn't thought of that. My wife perhaps will do it. I think the disrespect was summed up in the last comment. I guess I'll be the most hated man in Walton when we've done this.
Okay, thank you. Right, now, when we were on site this morning, it was pointed out to us that the road we walk down often has raw sewage coming back up into the gardens. Now, we are, well, at least I'm aware of the Supreme Court judgment. That aside, there is meant to be a visit by Yorkshire Water soon because they've got to come and assess the position. What's your view, and can you outline to the members of the panel that weren't there the actual problems with sewage that you have, without getting too graphic about it if you can, but so if you just explain what's been happening.
For at least 30 years, and probably before then, we've been residents there for 20 years, and I have just long lists. I can just show you long lists of our dealings with Yorkshire Water, because when the sewers fill up, it comes, the Walton sewage system comes down the side of our house, basically. It's particularly when there's storm waters, particularly when rain fills up, it all drains into the sewer system.
Okay.
So we've just got endless lists of confirmation and details. Yorkshire Water have had to pay compensation to us at various times for goodwill gestures. I have photos of our neighbour's garden that's got full of sewage. 11,000 litres of sewage were pulled out of, were sucked out of their garden last November. November 2021. So we live in a little bit of fear when there's heavy rain, particularly.
Okay, that's fine. Now, my final point is.
So just on that point, I've got a quick point, and I think Chris has as well. So I don't recognise what the officer said about Yorkshire Water's position. Yes, they haven't objected, but I had an email from them. Myself and Councillor Harrington have been in correspondence with them for some time to say they haven't fully assessed the application. They emailed me yesterday to say, yes, they haven't raised an objection at this point, but they want to have a site visit, which they're inviting me and local residents to try and see what can be done. And they're not in a position to say if this situation can be resolved or not. So what was expressed that they think development should go ahead subject to conditions is not accurate.
Phil owns a house that has the worst problem in terms of frequency. He has a special arrangement that he has an emergency system that they come and clean up, pump some of the stuff away. One of the things that I particularly wanted to say, I've walked past it and ignored it like a lot of other visitors and not taken it that seriously. Yeah, it smells a bit and it's a bit inconvenient and it shouldn't be happening. When we got into the neighbourhood plan and started discussing it, and I was told that what it really means is if you live in one of these houses, not just the worst one of Phil's, when that sewer's backed up, you can't use your loo. You can't have a shower in the morning. Phil and his wife, who's here, have to go out and have a wash and a shower in the local sports club. It's 2023 and we're still trying to do that. We were trying to do that before this application went in, and that's what it's like to live with a bad sewer. There are 5 houses in particular that have to stop using their facilities because the sewer has backed up.
And honestly, it is the final question. In paragraph 104, it refers to policy BE4 of the neighbourhood plan. I can't see anything else. What is policy BE4? It says, furthermore, the development complies with policy BE4 of the neighbourhood plan, to which positive weight can be attributed. That's the comments of the officer. What is BE4?
Good luck finding BE4. It doesn't exist.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Hazelwood.
Yeah, I'm afraid with the water, that's what you get with the privatised water industry. All the money being taken out in profit. I support a nationalised water industry where the profits will be put back into to rectify. Hang on, I've got another question. So what you're saying is that Yorkshire Water want to come and have a site visit. Am I right? Because they're saying that they do not, the report we've got here in front of us, they're saying that before they can give any judgment on this, they need to come and have a proper site visit with all parties present to look at whether this is feasible or not. So then, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, obviously you'll have read the report and understand the issues with the Supreme Court judgment, but Yorkshire Water's position is, yeah, they haven't objected, but they're not in a position to say if this problem is solvable or not. There have been multiple site visits, but they want a further one, which they emailed me about yesterday, and that's their position, which is not quite as described.
Okay, are there any, Councillor Stevenson?
A couple of questions, Chair. Just returning back to the public right of way. As local residents, how often do you see ramblers and the like coming with their nice laminated maps and using the public right of way from Walton all the way up to Bickerton?
Never. Because it's considered by locals that it's not a right of way, that you don't go there.
Are there any signposts off of Hall Park Lane signposting a public right of way?
No.
As local residents, how often do you see, if you can see that far down without using it, that the gate we've been shown here, is that gate permanently there or is it normally open?
I don't know the answer to that because we don't go down that lane because we've always believed it to be a private.
I can colour it in a bit, and the farmer is actually here. It's permanently shut, but that means when there's not an agricultural vehicle on the lane. He goes down, stops the vehicle, opens the gates, takes his tractor, sprayer, whatever it is through, comes back, closes the gates, and then proceeds. So it's opened from time to time during the day, but most of the time it is closed.
Yeah, and I think the pertinent point is you've seen the state and condition of the road. It isn't in the ownership or the gift of the applicant to light it. It's incredibly dark at night. If you imagine a young woman or a couple of women on their own trying to get back from the pub down the dark, and they're not going to feel safe. If you have mobility issues, you would not be able to use that road, that footpath at night. It simply wouldn't be possible. So there are so many issues with it, and it isn't in the gift of the applicant to resolve those issues.
And my final question, just thinking about the application site itself, the land. When we're on the site visit today, there are several horses grazing on the land. But over the past maybe decade or so, what kind of agricultural use has that land been in?
When you say the last decade or so, until February, July it was, Bill, that you had to get them off, wasn't it? Until July, there was 50 cows. They use a rotation system. They have them on there for so many weeks, then they move them to another field and let the grass grow. In February is why I got slightly confused. There was a thing put on the website, submission put in by the owner saying that they're expecting the grazing, and they're going to put in extra fences. It even goes on to say for cattle, but in about April, May, the farmer was given his notice to move his beasts out, and he had to do that at about 2 months' notice. Since then, there have been horses. There are 2 regular horses and a pony, and they are managed, if that's the right word. I'm not a horse person. They're managed by electric fences. Not really ecologically what we'd expect, but they're managed by electric fences, a lot of them. And apart from that, for a period during the winter, there were 10 sheep, they're specialist sheep. They came, they were there, and they were taken away. And the tenant has since moved and got a place in another farm, and we think that the sheep went there. There were only 2 horses and 1 pony, the normal tenants there, until last Sunday, 10 days ago. 6 horses then appeared, which you've seen this morning. That is not normal. They only came 10 days ago. We believe they're all pregnant, and they were in a confined space, and they've come here, we assume, just for a temporary move.
Thank you. Any other questions? David?
Do you think that one of the unintended consequences of this application may be to sort of help deal with some of the issues like speeding, like the sewage, that have been raised in this application as a consequence?
Others might want to chip in, but I think they're only going to make them worse. The general assumption with considering an application like this is, do the benefits outweigh the harm? I can see a lot of harm. I can't see a lot of benefits. The sewage issue is going to get worse. The highways issue are going to get worse. There's more danger with more vehicles coming, more pedestrians, which you might try and encourage them down that dark lane on a night. I suspect they would carry on up the busy, unlit 60-mile-an-hour speed limit road as the quickest, most direct and probably feel safer option. So no, I don't see any of the mitigations. And the fear is the amount of mitigation you'd have to put in to make it sustainable and viable. Bearing in mind there's no shop close by, there's no amenity, there isn't anything like that in the village. You'd have to make a much bigger site. And you do wonder why the application site is for 4 fields rather than just 1. And I know it's not a consideration, but there's a real fear that we'll be coming back to revisit this again and again, saying, oh, there's just not, we just need a few more and a few more and a few more. And I think this is the thin end of the wedge.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Can I do a very brief one? to add to that? You
Yeah,
say,
sure.
will we be better off? One of the things that I find extremely difficult to understand, I've only seen it in the last few days, planning application with 41 conditions that need monitoring. What a workload for you guys. You know, and when we say that, for example, from the outset, grazing was seen as one of the important things, it's one side of the village that's left with grazing. The rest to the north and to the west is all factory farming, big fields, etc., etc. This is the last grazing area, is the only livestock farmer there. An undertaking was given that grazing would be retained. Retained means what's there will still be there. Within 3 or 4 months, he's been evicted. How have Leeds been able? Did Leeds know about that? Did they think that's what they were expecting? Can you trust these people? How are you going to manage 41 situations like that?
Good, thank you. Any other questions? Right, thank you very much. And we also have we have the agent for the applicant to attend to speak obviously in support of the application. Thank you. You've got 4 minutes when you're ready.
Dear members, I am Wendy Sockett, the planning consultant representing the applicant, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. This application is for a small 8-unit holiday accommodation development on the outskirts of Walton. The aim of the proposal is to provide a quiet environment for visitors, mainly couples, to enjoy short breaks in a rural location close to the city. Consideration to the potential impacts of the proposed development was given prior to submission, with a number of modifications made post-submission in order to resolve the planning concerns raised as part of the planning process. The proposal minimises the extent of physical development in this rural site, with only those structures and features which are absolutely necessary for this form of development, and additional features required by Leeds City Council. The application is supported by landscape and ecological appraisals, and these form the basis of the proposal, ensuring the location of the proposed units had a minimal visual impact on the conservation area, particularly the setting of St. Peter's Church, and any biodiversity features on the site. The layout and design provide biodiversity enhancements through hedgerow and wildflower planting, as well as the long-term management of the site. The proposed units have been positioned on the eastern area of the land owned by the applicant, thus ensuring the maximum distance practical between the development and residents of Walton. As the officer's report notes, there is 150 metres between the most westerly unit and the nearest dwelling. Safe pedestrian access to the village of Walton is provided through the formation of a footpath which links to a metalled road before joining Hall Park Road and its existing pedestrian footpaths. This pedestrian access, as well as the main vehicle access, will avoid the use of hard surfacing as much as is permitted by the Leeds Highways team. It is proposed that a geogrid style product is used to form these accesses. These are widely used products that provide temporary or permanent vehicle services, retain the natural drainage features of the land, allow grass and other vegetation to grow, thus retaining the natural appearance of the land, and have proved popular for parking for sites operated by the National Trust and other attractions such as the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, all sites which will experience significantly more vehicle movements than that we proposed today. Furthermore, there are a range of technical specifications for these products, ranging from light pedestrian usage to regular daily usage by HGVs, including refuse vehicles. Ongoing consultation with Yorkshire Water has confirmed that the proposed development can be connected to the public foul sewer system, although this is likely to require upgrade works. It would appear from the details set out in a number of objections that the works required could be of benefit to local residents and resolve ongoing issues that they have been experiencing. This is a modestly scaled proposal that has the potential to provide modest economic and employment benefits to the local area, provide an opportunity for those who are looking for a short city break but prefer to avoid hotels and bed and breakfast accommodation, or indeed those who live in the city and are just looking for a short break and a change of scenery without travelling for hours. When considering the scale of the proposed scheme alongside the landscape and biodiversity improvements, we feel that the proposed development is wholly in accordance with local and national policy and is appropriate for the location, and request that members seek to approve the application before them today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I, before I invite members, can I quickly just ask a question which was raised earlier on about the consultation with the local residents? Bear in mind, there's only about just over 100 households in the area, and there's about 200 plus residents living in this village. Have you done any consultation, and in which way you have trying to contact the local residents?
No, we didn't do any consultation. It was a small development, so we didn't.
Absolutely, small development with many issues which we've already heard, and what we have seen that it's been going on for quite a number of years now. And why didn't you not think about consulting? I mean, it's something that is common sense, isn't it? Trying to bring people around the table and trying to find a solution if there are any issues that you might be able to address.
We opted to do it through the standard planning process, wait for the formal objections to be received and look to resolve on any pertinent issues.
Yeah, Councillor Stevenson and then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I'm quite pleased to hear that you, although I think consultation is always encouraged, and I think any pre-application advice would have suggested that as well, that you mention that you are keen to respond to any objections received. So on to drainage first. If Yorkshire Water say that significant engineering works would have to take place in order to make the drainage system viable, and to, I think your words were, to respond to existing problems, are you saying then that your client is more than happy to address any existing problems in drainage, regardless of cost, in order to make this viable?
I've done a number of holiday park applications of various sizes. Drainage is always an issue that needs to be considered. The usual approach that we take is there's a planning condition that's attached. It's a pre-commencement condition, and we have to provide appropriate details, satisfactory details, in order to get that condition discharged. As part of the process, we would expect to sort of liaise in further detail with Yorkshire Water and confirm what the position is, what works need doing, who's responsible for what costs, and we go from that process, really.
In your vast experience of holiday parks, have you ever tried to get planning permission on a site that has drainage issues so bad as this one, where foul water up to, I think it was 1,200 litres of excrement is on people's front lawn? Have you had any experience of that before?
I've not had any specific experience with sites which have sewer problems on site. This is an off-site sewer problems. I've done a number of applications where there's been extensive works that have had to be upgraded. We've had to spend significant amounts of money putting in pressurized drainage systems to go over 1 kilometre from a site, increasing and upgrading the facilities on drainage works at the Yorkshire Water wastewater treatment sites, and I've not yet come across one that cannot be resolved.
Before today, were you aware that 1,200 litres of foul excrement was being deposited regularly on people's gardens?
I have been made aware that there'd been leaks and flooding and drainage issues. We've seen some previous videos as well from some of the flood events that have been in the local area over the recent years. But again, it's a technical issue that we feel that we can, resolve with Yorkshire Water.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on. If I wanted to have a family holiday on this location and bring my disabled grandmother, what would I do with her?
Thank you for those comments. The units that we've proposed can be easily modified for disabled access. And we can, depending on what the requirements are, they can be modified to gain the usual ramps. We can be modified to improve things for people with visual impairments. I mean, literally anything can be done.
So is there anything in here so far that makes an allocation for that? Is there a designated pod, for want of a better word, that's going to be accessible? And in terms of facilities as well, I'm thinking getting in and out the footpath as well. Is there any upgrades proposed to make that compatible for somebody with a wheelchair?
As I mentioned, the pods can be made accessible. We haven't provided detailed design of an accessible pod. It is something that we would expect to work out as part of the planning conditions, as usual, in detailed design. And we'd be happy to designate one or even more pods to do that. The pedestrian access that we're providing on site will be of appropriate width, so it can be used by people with wheelchairs and small children with prams and buggies. And as far as the pedestrian access, which goes from the boundary of the field to the road, it's something that, it didn't look too difficult. I've seen people, wheelchair users, using much more degraded footpaths than that, and with maintenance, it's nothing that can't be overcome.
Okay, thank you. Have you got a copy of the actual deeds, I suppose, for the land or and otherwise, which would identify for us that the pedestrian access footway that you just referred to as being not too degraded, you indeed have a right of way over, and also have a right to do the repair works you just suggested yourself by making it viable? Or would you need a landowner's permission to do that?
I don't have a copy of the deeds, so I can't particularly comment on that in any great detail. But usually people don't have too much concern about somebody making a mild repair to a road, but we would need to go speak with the landowner, I would expect.
Have you spoken to the landowner to date?
No.
Final question, Chair. Could you just explain to us how you think that your application meets policy BE2 of Walton Neighbourhood Plan?
Does anybody have a copy of the policy to hand for me to review?
One would presume that you have addressed this in terms of before you've made the application, design and access statement, anything, but
I did do, I just don't have that. I can't remember the exact wording. So the proposal is for a small glamping development, which is a commercial business. Glamping development is designed for rural locations. We have had regard to landscaping, local views, to make sure that the actual physical design and how it's going to sit in the landscape has been taken care of. We've made sure that the development is away from local residences to protect residential amenity. It's a small development, so the potential impact from noise, amenity and inconvenience is highly not going to be very likely. And 8 units, it's a very small increase in the number of vehicle movements, which will be barely perceptible on that highway network. We have made modifications to provide a safe access. Site management will make sure that there's much information is given around the site as well to make sure people do not walk on Hallpark Road and use the alternative access which we are looking to provide.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelwood.
Yeah, I've got a couple of concerns. So bearing in mind that there are issues with sewage, and you haven't yet spoken to Yorkshire Water about that. And Councillor Lamb has indicated that they want to come on site and have assess the whole situation before they can make a decision on it. And you haven't done any consultation with the local with the local community. We heard that the site has no running water and no electricity. So have you spoken to or made plans? Because I'm just concerned that you haven't spoken to Yorkshire Water about this huge drainage sewerage issue. So what other plans have been made? Because at the moment we've got a field with no utilities running to it. So have you spoken to other utility providers, and how will that work?
The landowner applicant has been sort of in discussion with utility providers about getting services to site. That is normal with any development. With regards to Yorkshire Water have been a consulting. We have had a drainage consultant. They have consulted with Yorkshire Water. The position of Yorkshire Water is, as far as my understanding extends to, is that they have the ability to undertake the upgrade works to make the site suitable for connection to the public sewer system. There is an extensive detailed design process to go through to get to that stage. So currently they are not objecting. We have that design to go through. There is the financial aspects to deal with in confirming who is responsible for what element of the costs, the financial arrangements. They do a number of approaches as to sort of pay back, but it's entirely in line with this type of development around the country. And should members look to approve this development today, there is a pre-commencement planning condition which requires the drainage and surface water details to be submitted to and approved by this local authority within 3 years. If the applicant is unable to do that, then the local authority, and he cannot commence work, so nothing will happen. So there is that fallback position. But I think 3 years, in my experience, is more than adequate time to find a technical solution, get the plans drawn up, the agreements made, submitted and approved, and get the condition discharged.
Councillor Anderson.
When we were on site this morning, we were shown just approximately where the metal gate is, where it was anticipated that your footpath would come out. Am I correct that that is the location? Because again, on site this morning, there was a difference of opinion as to where exactly the footpath would be coming out on that. Is it down beside the gate that is locked, or is it further up the path towards the main road?
The pedestrian access that we are proposing will be located on the Hallpark Road side of that gate. So that locked gate won't be.
Well, right, okay. The roundabout way I was getting to is, have you been asked by the council to assess the asset value of the large tree that looks as though, based on where we were told the entrance was going to be, that would be affected by it. That was the roundabout way I was trying to get you to prove whether or not that was where the entrance was going to be. So down at the very bottom, just past the gate, on the public side of it, let's call it that way, there is a large tree which would have an asset value in both financial terms and in carbon capture terms. Have you been asked to provide an assessment of that or not?
As part of the application process, we did a tree survey, and we've also provided tree protection plans. We have avoided any works around any of the large trees on site. The idea would be to remove a small section of the hedgerow in order to provide a gate that opens inwards into the application land, thus not blocking any of the access road, and it will be on the public side of that gate.
Noise pollution. Now, there's a condition on here about amplified music. Now, what's your definition of amplified music? Because nowadays people a lot younger than me seem to be able to get hold of gizmos that can, small ones, very small handheld ones that can produce quite a bit of power. What sort of restrictions, when you say you're going to restrict it, how are you going to control that? And then on top of that as well, have you looked how far away the noise will start to make a difference? I've got a glamping site in my ward, and there are often disputes as to whether it's 50 yards, 100 yards from the edge of the glamping site where you can or cannot hear what's happening. Have you carried out any of those tests? And then the final thing is, when people are there enjoying themselves, again, on the glamping site within my ward, they've had to apply for a license in order to sell alcohol. So they need a place, a unit to actually hold the alcohol in while people go and enjoy themselves and they don't cause any trouble. I'm not saying that they cause trouble, but have you got any facility on site that alcohol could be stored on? Because if people are going for glamping, in the one in my ward, it's often used by people who are on hen parties, as an example, which again, is not causing any great difficulty and problem, but they do like to enjoy themselves. That's the whole point of going to these events. What's your process for having enjoyment, entertainment, etc. on site? Because there's no physical place, whereas there is a barn on the one in my ward.
So there's products for everybody. There's Butlins who will attract people who are wanting lots of facilities, lots of attractions, and lots of drinks. This site is for people looking for quiet recreational, quiet enjoyment of the countryside, of the natural environment. There is no intention to provide any facilities on site. If anybody wants to bring alcohol with them, then that's their right to do so. So that would be stored in their own units. The noise, we had a noise survey done. It concluded that there would be barely any difference really in the ambience levels and barely any impact on the local residents. In terms of ongoing management, if people, there's contact details for people to ring in an emergency or in case of sort of noise pollution to report an incident. People who are found to be behaving unsociably will be asked to leave immediately as part of site management. The idea is to build a reputable business. It's not a stag weekend or a hen party location. These are small units to accommodate generally couples looking to get away for a break. So it's just aimed at a different market to the hen and stag party, or even the traditional sort of holiday park at the seaside.
I'll take that the way it's right. Is this a 365-day-a-year operation? In other words, are people going to be using this in the winter months when it's darker?
These developments traditionally are used and operational throughout the year in order to provide maximum economic benefits. I appreciate your concerns over people using it when it's dark, but as we've set out in the management plan details that we've given, torches will be provided for the people to stay on site, because the idea is to keep the lighting pollution to a minimum. We'll be using motion sensitive lighting, 1 meter bollard lighting where necessary, but that's it. But it is just, people do like to get away from the big lights of the city and enjoy a natural environment.
You've mentioned yourself about the site management. Now, I know it's not similar. I accept it. There's no way comparable. But at a city plans panel recently, we asked the question to why there was nobody on site to deal with issues that occur on a day-to-day basis. How close are the people who are responsible to this site so that so if something was to happen, say some of the drainage work, despite you spending millions on it, just fails because life's like that you can spend a lot of money and it suddenly fails, or some of the power doesn't work, so they can't do some of these things. How far away is the nearest person who could manage that site and take action to resolve any problems, and also potentially evict anyone who maybe is being a little bit enthusiastic in their lifestyle whilst present?
The intention would be to employ a person who can be used as the emergency contact and sort of site liaison, who will be located close to the site. We wouldn't want them to be too far away because obviously if there is an emergency, we need to get to them quickly. But there will be like a 24-hour call.
It's building on something that Councillor Stevenson asked about the cost of the flood risk management and any other measures that you need to introduce. You've got 8 units that you've got there. So whatever total that comes to, you've got to spread that over a number of years and over 8 units. The units appear, from what we can see, to be relatively well spaced out within the field. Now, forgetting about any chance of you using any other fields to expand the business, have you got any concerns that if the cost from the Yorkshire Water and the other amenities was to rise to a level that your client will have set, would they need to get extra pods put on site in this small field that you've got, not taking over any other fields, but just narrowing the gaps between the pods if the costs rise? Is there any risk of that at all?
There's been no discussion about any intention to increase the number of pitches. We're looking at 8. And that's the development that we're looking at.
Right. But if the cost was to be high, you would need to recover your costs somehow or another. So you can either start charging people, say, £10,000 a night. Fine. That's one way of recovering your overhead costs. Or you take it over a longer period of time, which means it hits the bottom line. So how would you manage that issue?
Unfortunately, I'm just the agent, so I am not able to particularly answer that question. But the idea is it's 8 glamping units. It's a long-term investment for the landowner and the applicant.
Councillor Anderson is on fire today, which I can absolutely understand why. Yes, Michael.
Hi there. The footpath access to the site, did you say that was gated off? It had a gate?
The proposed pedestrian access, there is no gate at the moment. So the idea is we'll produce a footpath that will go from the glamping site to the public access, and we'll be providing a gate. It's all been discussed, and we've provided plans with the access of the public rights of way officer.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering whether you'd had any thoughts about what kind of a gate that was. I think the state of the footpath is probably wheelchair accessible, although I think it's clear that it's not in a particularly great state. But I'm thinking that accessibility will be made worse potentially by a gate that wheelchair users would struggle to kind of open, and that there are some, more wheelchair friendly, gates available. I was wondering whether that had come into play at all, that kind of thinking.
We haven't looked at a particular design of gate as such yet. It will be wide enough to close off the lane, the pedestrian access way given, which will be suitable for wheelchairs and pram users. And again, we will have to provide details of an accessible gate. There's many options available. So yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Would dogs be allowed on site? Would visitors be able to bring dogs along with them?
I don't believe they will be able to. I think the general idea is just to keep this to sort of couples and avoid having pets running around on site, because, well, previously we've had grazing cattle on the land. We've now got horses, which is the tenant of the land, and we don't particularly want to upset them. Whilst we are proposing stock-proof fencing, etc., we'll be looking to sort of minimise that.
Yeah, I think that was the kind of question I was getting at, that obviously with the potentially cattle around and certainly horses, any fenced off areas, particularly maybe where it came to accessing the pond with the newts in, it'd be important that obviously smaller dogs couldn't get through that. And then the final question was just about the road access, the vehicular access to that main road. Obviously, where the assumption is that visitors to the site won't use that road, they'll use the footpath, but potentially that they could use that if they wanted to, presumably, and that might be a dangerous route given the lack of footpath on the actual road itself. I was wondering whether there were any plans in place to kind of deter visitors from using that route, and signage, or any kind of plans to really emphasize that might be a dangerous route and that they had to use the footpath.
There will be information provided to customers booking on site at the time of booking to explain that to them. There will be an information pack provided in the units themselves, and there'll also be some signage at that access road strongly advising, warning people not to walk down Hall Park Road.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. We live in an increasingly non-binary world. I've been to both Butlins and to glamping sites in the past. It's not one or the other. People make different options. And in every glamping site I've been to, and increasingly every damn holiday we do in the UK, we take our dog with us now. And I think you're really cutting off part of the market if you're thinking you're going to be banning dogs this site. And in reality, I suspect what's going to happen once planning has gone through is that dogs will be allowed on site, because that's what people want to do when they take holidays in the UK, short breaks. So on that point, there was a boundary fence in the garden we visited earlier today. And so I wonder if any boundary treatments are being proposed on existing residential properties in order to protect them from people who might let the dogs run loose, even though you've got some signs that might say otherwise.
The erection of sort of dog protective fences is not something that we've specifically looked at as part of this application. As mentioned to the previous councillor, stock-proof fencing will be erected around the development to stop sort of trespass, or the sort of movement of grazing cattle or grazing horses onto the site, and people from the site to interfere with the animals and disturb them. We've got extensive hedgerow planting, which they'll be subject to protection as well. But would seem to me that would be sort of general site maintenance, that if there's any holes to stop, I don't know, residents' dogs accessing the site, then we would look to manage that as well.
I want to seek your guidance, Chair, because in a question earlier on, when I asked about permissions to resurface the so-called footpath and whether permissions have been sought, the answer was no. But in the earlier representation, we were told that the actual owner of that footpath is in the audience. Would it be in order for me to ask the owner of the footpath whether he would be prepared to allow development works on his property? Because the answer to that will probably determine where my mind goes in this process, Chair.
Can I bring David in this? You might be able to advise me better.
Yeah. People will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anything in the public speaking protocol which particularly facilitates that. But I suppose the answer to the question is the existing right of way, non-definitive right of way, is outside of the application site, so we have no control over that. It's not something we could impose conditions on or require works to. It is what it is. What it is.
Right, David.
Yeah, I've got about four short points, really. One of the objectors said that the man who was involved in this application was perhaps the most hated man in Walton. So I wonder if you comment on that. The second thing is, if this didn't go through, what would be the alternative use for the site and what would happen to it? Thirdly, how would you replenish the pond and looking after the great nested newts, greater newts, because it dries up, I think. So how would you look after that? And are there recycling facilities to be on the site?
Forgive me if I missed some of the points. Please remind me what they are at the end. Great crested newts and pond management. Any works around the area will be done in accordance with a Natural England licence that will be required. So there will be professional ecologists input into that, documentation submitted to Natural England, a management plan set up, and that's how things will go forward. If it's not satisfactory, Natural England will not issue a licence, and we cannot do any works which harm the newts, and we can be prosecuted for that. If planning permission isn't approved here, I suppose the first option would be to appeal. Alternative developments can also be looked into as well. I can't speak for the applicant at this point in time. Could you remind me of the other 2 points, please?
Yes, so he was called the most hated man in Walton, and recycling.
Recycling, we have a bin store, so we can make the necessary arrangements for both general and recycling waste to be collected. The units will be provided with sort of similar receptacles inside for general waste and recycling, which the site management team will make sure that they are put into the correct main bins. As for being the most hated man in Walton, it would I think that's a common thing for applications in rural areas. It's emotions run high.
Thank you. I can't see any more hands up, but thank you very much, Ms. Socket. So we'll move on to the question to the officers, and I'll invite members if there are any questions for officers. Sorry, Councillor Hazelwood.
Yeah, it's just to highways officers. A comment was made about traffic calming measures were supposed to be in effect in the local area by September 2022, but we've been told they haven't, and I'm just wondering what the delays or whether they have, or what's happened with that, for people to not think that they've been put in place, or if they haven't, when will they be put in place?
I think they are plans to be put in place. I'm not sure if they have been put in place. I'll have to check and get back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, and we've heard that they were supposed to be in place by September 22. That was the plan. So I appreciate you saying the plan to be put in place. Do we know when? Because obviously we've missed a deadline already. So I'm just wanting to know what's happening with them, what the delay is.
I'll have to provide you an update on that if that's okay.
Right, any Councillor Anderson?
Honestly, I will try and be as quick as I possibly can. Right now, the pumping station, whereabouts it mentions a pumping station there, I think in the conditions. Whereabouts is the pumping station going to go on site? You didn't refer to it on when you did your presentation.
Is it possible to bring the plans back up, Sarah?
And also to cover how you're going to merge it into the area. So in other words, it doesn't stand out.
Yeah. 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 Do you want me to flick over from here? It's towards the end. It's the one that shows the drainage layout. That one, please. Yeah. So the pumping station is in this location at the moment there. And essentially a pumping station is a largely subterranean unit. So it has a limited above ground form. So we've asked for those details. I mean, it's quite standard for developments where there's gradient issues to have those in place.
The visibility issues should be minimal.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. Right, that's fine. Happy with that. Right. On condition 25, what's the reason behind that condition? It just says log burners, smokeless fuel only. I mean, is it log burners in the units? Is it?
Yes. So at some stage, log burner, the actual glamping units have got a log burner within them, and some of the residents have actually made concerns regarding air pollution. So we thought it wasn't an unreasonable request to suggest smokeless fuel for those which could be easily fitted in.
Okay, it was the logic behind it. The generator locator.
Yeah, I don't know which paragraph it is, but essentially the units are powered by a solar panel which has a backup generator, and the backup generators are attached to the amphipods in a sealed unit, which helps minimize the sound output. Like obviously the owners themselves don't want it to be noisy, because then that affects the residents who are at very close quarters. So it's a very low sound output from those generators, but it'd be one per unit.
But presumably it all has to go through one control unit somewhere on the site, that they'll all come into a unit somewhere that controls it, so that someone, if one of them was to break down, the person who's given the task of looking after it locally can then come along, identify which unit that's actually caused the problem, because they'll be in series or they'll be in sequence, right? That's how they'll be connected, surely.
I don't have the technical details of how the generators are going to work, but
so in other words, we don't have surety, right? That's fine. We've not got surety on that. And finally, on terms of the accessibility, in terms of access to public transport, how is this proposal policy compliant? Because it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very good point, and I've tried to set out the context. So if you refer to paragraph 81 of the reports, I'll just give you a moment. So essentially there, we've acknowledged that it lies outside the urban area. The development itself is likely to require, it's likely to be car dominated in terms of the trips. And I've set out the national policy guidance on that. So that acknowledges that developments in rural areas are often not well served by public transport. essentially that's what we've assessed again. So what we're not assessing this development on is like urban style accessibility to services, but for a glamping development or a rural tourism, I don't think there's an expectation from the users that they're going to have on site. You know, all these facilities within walking distance.
Council's policies on trying to reduce the reliability on motor vehicles isn't specific to urban areas, suburban, rural, or whatever. It's quite a clear policy. I might disagree with it, but it's a very clear policy to understand that the council's intention is to reduce the reliance on motor vehicles. Surely, by us allowing an application to go forward that we know isn't going to be in compliance with the spirit, at least, of the proposed direction the council want to take us in, doesn't make sense.
Do you want to bring David in?
Yeah,
David. Thanks, Chair. I did note that Councillor Lamb referred to the accessibility standards in relation to policy T2 as well when he was speaking on the application. When you actually look at the accessibility standards, they relate to standards and indicators for employment and social infrastructure uses and for housing developments. They cover things such as when you look at for employment and social infrastructure uses, they cover employment, primary health education, secondary health education, leisure and retail. Now, and when the housing is self-explanatory, it is what it is. When I look at those, I don't actually read that this form of development falls within those sort of categories. It's not easily categorized within that. It's not captured within that. However, yes, there is this broader point about sustainability and the issue of encouraging or just trying to discourage the private car. But then we fall back on to see what the MP, our documents, our core strategy is largely silent on that. So then we fall back to what Steve has identified at paragraph 81 of the MPP of our report and paragraph 85 of the MPP F. And that's the judgment that we've come to. I suppose it is what Steve was saying. Inevitably, when you get these sorts of leisure developments, it's intrinsic within them that because they're in rural locations well away from the built environment, that they're going to be in less sustainable locations with less access to public transport and less access to local facilities. Then you just have to balance that against maybe the opportunities it provides for use of the countryside and any economic benefits that may bring. And that's just really something for the decision maker to come to a view on. But I think it would be difficult to refuse it purely on the basis that it encourages use of the private car.
Final question is, we don't have a specific glamping policy of any description or any policies that we as a committee can fall back on to order to assess whether or not it is or is not policy compliant. Are there any plans for a glamping policy or a similar type policy to be developed by the council so that we as a committee can be more informed as to what isn't, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to apply urban policies that have been written in the main for urban situations. So we're trying to apply it to a rural situation and it's leading to conflicts. David's just explained how we've got to take in a balanced judgment that argument. So are there any plans to try and introduce a glamping policy?
I mean, at this moment in time, we're working on the next development plans moving forward, and as part of that process, the local plan officers have asked us to identify gaps in the policies where new policies are likely to be required. So we have put forward that I'm not sure what stage it's at or whether we're going to be doing one. It's unlikely it'll be a glamping policy. It's likely to be a rural tourism policy if it does come forward.
answer, our trust officers will now go back to the policy people and say, we do need a glamping policy because it would have helped and aided. I'm trying to use the proper ways of doing things, that's all.
Yes, noted, councillor. We'll do that. Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, any other questions? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, I think it was Councillor Anderson's. No, it was a question opposite to the last speaker. In terms of what happens if this doesn't get approved today, and the agent for the applicant said that other development could be explored. Now, increasingly on the fringes, there are people and platforms, political parties who argue that we should do away with intensive farming, get away with cattle, etc., to help the climate crisis, etc. So obviously the consequence of doing that is if farms disappear, there's going to be more and more of this type of stuff because you've got to use the land for something or indeed make a living on. So what kind of other development would this rural land be susceptible to in terms of the planning policy?
Thank you. I mean, it's a difficult question to answer really, because as the planning authority, we only respond to what's put forward. But policy RL1, which covers rural land, talks about protecting rural land for its own sake and the recreational resource, and it talks about it being the location for valued landscapes, agriculture, wildlife, natural features, and also the setting for a prosperous rural economy. So it's difficult to say what could come forward under the rural economy. Essentially any development would have to show how it meets our local development plan policies, which we don't have any really specifically in terms of rural tourism, but also then fall back on the national policy, which does seek to protect the countryside for its own sake. So it's difficult to give an answer on prospective developments, but certainly things that are more urban in nature, such as a housing development, for instance, or something, wouldn't meet the criteria of being sensitive to the character. Whereas I've concluded in the early parts that a small scale glamping site can be achieved without affecting that semi-rural character. So it's difficult, but there are countryside style developments that can come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. You've got
Sorry.
another question.
Sorry, I had four, but is that all right? Thank you. Can I come back to the footpath then and draw your attention to paragraph 27, which is on page 24. I think the Public Rights of Way team have suggested that this is a non-definitive bridle way. I don't see any reference anywhere to this being a bridle way. I've checked on the definitive maps, the Rights of Way maps, that it's not a bridle way. Indeed, it is actually defined as a non-definitive footpath. And it's been a while since I was in English language classes, but I would assume non-definitive, another word for that is indeterminate, which means it's in question. And that's certainly what we've heard today. Nobody has yet been able to say to me that this is a registered public right of way that people have rights to traverse over. And when I look on the council's Leeds public rights of way map, it indeed says it is not a definitive footpath. So can somebody please describe to me what the legal or planning definition of non-definitive footpath is?
David or
yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, you're quite right. It's not a definitive right of way. It appears on the definitive map and we call it a non-definitive public right of way. It's not a bridle way, it's a public right of way because I've looked as well. In essence, what that means is someone has made a claim that should be a definitive public right of way. And normally these things, as I understand it, become definitive public rights of way if with evidence it's been shown that they've been used as a right of way for 20 years or more. So someone's made that claim. That claim's with our public rights of way team. who will at some point in time investigate that and see whether that claim should be upgraded and the map should be upgraded for it to become a definitive right of way.
Okay, so in effect, my next door neighbour could make a claim to the council and say that I regularly nip across Councillor Stevenson's backyard when he's not out, and therefore I've got a claim on it, and then come forward with a planning application to put a granny flat in the back garden, and then say I'm going to use that Councillor Stevenson's back garden to allow Granny to cross over his back garden without any permission from him whatsoever. And we're going to have been asked today to give planning application approval to something based on an argument that the Public Rights of Way team haven't even yet investigated a claim of and made notification that it's a definitive footpath. Is my understanding correct?
I'm loath to comment on your neighbour or your granny, but in terms of, as I understand it, when someone makes a claim, it has to be substantiated with some evidence for it then to appear on the public right of way map. Now, the extent of that evidence, I can't answer, and I can't also answer the full process and what they actually go through, the process that they go through. But as I understand it, someone has to make a claim. Making that claim has to come with a certain amount of evidence for it to be justified, as it were, to appear on the map, because it seems there'd be some sort of prospect that it will be made up, but ultimately whether it will or not will depend on the more detailed work. That's as I understand it. Did you want to come in, Pippa? Oh.
And just a quick addition that the status as a right of way of some description or anything definitive footpath, by the way, is separate still from actually who owns it. So who you would need permission, or technically gives the permission and freedom for the public to walk up and down. I've quickly tried to have a look. I think actually this strip is not registered. Obviously doesn't mean it has an owner, but it hasn't had an identified owner since land registration became a thing. And it's, as far as I can tell, but having a very quick look whilst we've been in panel, it's not registered.
Okay, thank you. So it's linked to that, because clearly there's some evidence required for us to be able to make a judgment there. So in terms of policy BE2 of the neighbourhood plan, one of the things that says specifically, if I just get it up, is that any new land-based businesses or diversification of land-based businesses are acceptable if they protect residential amenity and also do not adversely impact upon road safety. So if it becomes the case that the pedestrian access up the footpath is not viable, because Public Rights of Way say it isn't a definitive footpath, we disagree, that's gone. That means that pedestrians can only use the highways access proposed onto Hall Park Road. So has any assessment been done in terms of impact on road safety of pedestrians coming out of that highways access and using the road? And to put that into context, when we left the site visit earlier and I exited the driveway of the very nice homeowners who let me park on the drive for the visit, as I came out of there, one car came round the corner at speed and I had to slam my brakes on, and then a troop of cyclists came through. It was almost like a Garda show before I could even exit. So if there were pedestrians walking up and down there as well, what would that have any adverse impact on road safety, hypothetically?
Thank you.
That's not something we've assessed at the moment, but we walked down there today and obviously there's a potential for an issue. That's not all we've done at the moment is assess the applications that's before us.
Tom McKenna?
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit, I thought this was the first clamping site we've dealt with, and I was surprised that Barry said he's already got one in his ward. Can I ask, Stephen, did you look at it and did you learn any lessons, or did you have to, if it exists, obviously the first one, you can judge what type of issues it raises for local people, and I just wonder if that was taken into consideration.
Yeah, I wasn't actually aware of the one in Councillor Anderson's ward, but as part of the application, I reviewed the case law and other similar applications for glamping and other tourist uses. So that's kind of inbuilt into the report in some of the considerations. So the general considerations we'd look for a glamping site would be the same as we'd look for things like a camping site or a static caravan site, and then you'd make a visual amenity assessment according to what's proposed, really. So yeah, I mean, the presence or a non-presence of another glamping site, we can learn lessons from it. But in this instance, I think the report covers quite a lot of areas that we've considered this against, and we've we haven't found any undue harm against any of those key planning considerations.
Stephen, I'm just surprised that it's not been mentioned, and I just wonder if David knows is it likely to cause any problems, or John even, that we clearly are aware of it, aren't we? But it seems to me here's an example of a glamping site, which I understood Councillor Anderson to say is working pretty reasonably well.
Yeah, but it doesn't have planning permission. Enforcement have refused to take action against it.
Really?
That's not relevant, as it were, to this case, which we've got to evaluate as itself, but that's the problem. I have it, it's in operation, but it's not got official planning permission, and enforcement didn't need to say that it's not in the public interest jobs, and it was first brought in during COVID and back on the back of where you could do something for 50 days or something like that. That it was brought in on the back of that, and it's remained. How it originated in the first place.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, Jim?
No, I think that explanation by Councillor Anderson, it raises my question, really, isn't it? It's interesting. And I suppose things did happen during COVID, and, but yes, I think we should enforce, or we should invite them to, which we have to do, to apply for planning permission. And then, it'd be nice to be able to make the comparisons then.
Michael?
Thanks, Chair. We've heard a lot today about drainage issues and specifically Yorkshire Water. I think there's been some confusion, maybe some misinformation shared about what Yorkshire Water have and haven't said about this application. So I was just wondering if you could kind of summarise what involvement you've had with Yorkshire Water, and if they've said anything specifically about what effects this project might have on drainage around the area.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, we heard from Councillor Lamb, who obviously said there was ongoing discussions in that regard. And that was part of the planning process. We've consulted them formally, and they've responded on 2 occasions, recommending conditions in relation to drainage should the application be approved. So they've not raised objections, and that would be the point of process where they should either ask for more information or formally object. I'm not really sure. Obviously from my position, they've not objected and they've recommended these conditions. I'm unaware of the other conversations, but that could well be to deal with an existing problem, which essentially this development has to be self-serving and make sure it's acceptable from a drainage point of view in its own right. And obviously if the existing system can't take any more, that's going to require upgrade works And that's why the feasibility study is there, to understand what those works are likely to be and when they'll be required. You'll note that we've mentioned the Supreme Court judgment there and what we can and can't do. And we would have loved to have all this information up front. It's just something that we feel we can't ask for, or it'd be unjustified to refuse on that when there could well be a solution to the problem.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so if planning permission was approved, it would be on the basis of this feasibility study proving that it was feasible and not going to be a massive drain on the drains, no pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold really. The feasibility study will have to come in and be accepted, and we'll consult Yorkshire Water on that and our drainage people. And secondly, those upgrade works, if required, will have to be implemented before this development comes on board.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you. Shall we? Councillor Ray.
I know there's been no consultation on this. Is this what would normally happen, or would you expect something with this sort of development to actually consult the local residents, which I think would probably give a bit more feel as to how they feel about it? Or is it normal not to do that?
I mean, from a planning authority, we always recommend that people undertake their own consultations before an application comes in. Essentially, we can't insist that they do that, and through the planning process, we have our statutory consultation requirements. So we've been out and consulted the public for the statutory 21 days, and that's happened on a couple of occasions when we've had the amended plans as well. So there is that fallback. But yeah, we do recommend it, but we can't insist upon it.
Right, thank you. Can we now move on to the comments? Councillor Stevenson, and then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. When you look at the protocol for making referrals to plans panel, one of the things that officers regularly push back on elected members on is that there must be material planning considerations for it to get to this point. And so the fact it's got to this point means that we are being asked as decision makers to make a decision based on the information in front of us, put in front of us by officers in the report. And following the discussion, there seems to me to be two glaring omissions in that information that would enable us to make a decision on the application. The first being the confusion of is it a footpath or is it not a footpath? And on its own, whether it is or it isn't, might seem like a minor or moot point. However, the application sets out that the use of that footpath provides the pedestrian link to the village, negating the need to use the highway. So for whilst there's ever any doubt, or shall I say, well, there isn't lack of proof that it's a definitive footpath that can be used, the default position that I have to adopt is that it isn't a legal right of way until it's proven that it is. And therefore, those pedestrians would have to use the highway. The highways officers explained to us that that's not been modelled as yet in terms of the impact on the highway. And therefore, I'll have to accept the default position that at dusk or at dark, putting pedestrians down the road that we walked down earlier on when cars were zooming by, and we all commented how unsafe it was on the site visit, would have an adverse effect on the highway and therefore be contrary to policy BE2 of the Walton Neighbourhood Plan. And the second point is drainage. And I think what we're being asked is to give approval today based on a condition that passes the power to determine whether the drainage plan is good enough or not to officers. However, the reason we're discussing it today is because there's been a member referral to plans panel to remove that delegated power from officers and put it in the hands of elected members. So quite why I would then be asked to hand back over a key element of this application being drainage to officers and not elected members is a cause of concern to me. So I don't feel like there is sufficient evidence before me in those two specific areas that would allow me as a decision maker to approve this. And if I look at it the other way around, because if this ended up at appeal, and I was asked to justify, or my behalf has to justify a decision I'd made, I'd have to provide some evidence, and I can't because it's not here before me. So a frustration that this is here now, I think, Chair, would be my final comment. I don't understand why we couldn't have waited to have this at panel when those two critical pieces of information could have been proven and contained. I think that's probably a summary of my views, Chair.
Okay, anyone else? Oh, sorry, Barry.
Can I just, well, it's taken it a bit further than what Councillor Stevens just said. I would like to put forward a motion that we refuse this application. The reason being, I would have preferred to have been allowed to have changed it, but we have been told regularly at training that we cannot negotiate or change an application. We have either got to accept or reject the one before us. The one before us is not acceptable, in my view, in terms of the sustainability policy, particularly in terms of transport, in terms of MPPF paragraph 84, in terms of the MPPF chapter 9, the drainage issues that we've had that Councillor Stevenson has just explained, the footpath issues, the effect that we've not had any clarification on the disability use. Doesn't matter whether it's a physical disability or whether it's any other form of disability. It's going to be very difficult to use that footpath, irrespective of who owns it. Also, the neighbourhood plan policy BE2, we haven't complied with the way that that was written and was approved by an inspector, and also in terms of highway safety. So I'm basically proposing that we refuse this application, although it would have been far better if we'd been allowed to defer it, to be quite frank. But the only way to do something about it, because I'm not happy with it, so I'm putting forward a motion to refuse it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Anderson. If I could just try and add some clarity. In terms of, I think, the legal advice that you've been given, the way that we've interpreted it, and it wasn't clearly presented this way, and I accept that, but the way that we've interpreted it is that it's not really open for the plans panel to seek to renegotiate a scheme. However, if there are matters, say, that you want further information on, then that's fine. It's perfectly reasonable to make that request and defer consideration of a planning application to request further information. Also, I think if you're spotting something which doesn't sit comfortably with your understanding of planning policy and you would like the applicant to address that, I think that's, again, a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But I suppose what we're guarding against is and if you spot a harmful aspect of the development and you think that there's a mitigation measure, again, it's something that you could defer for officers to negotiate to see if you can overcome that harmful aspect. I think what the legal advice is really trying to avoid is saying you receive a proposal for, let's say, 10 houses, and you say, well, it's not acceptable as 10, but why don't you negotiate it down to 2? That sort of thing.
I'm happy to second the motion.
Councillor Hazelwood was showing interest. Is it on same?
Yeah, I mean, on the defer, I would support that because I mean we've already talked about the Yorkshire water issues. They want to go out on site. I'm not proposing that we change this. I want further information before I can make a decision on this. I don't want to say no, but I think we should defer on that basis that we need further information. There's numerous issues that have been brought up today that we need further information on that. I think before a lot of us can make, I'm seeing a lot of people nodding their heads. I think there's a lot more information that we all want before we can make a decision. We're not saying no, but we want that further information, first of all, before we can make an informed decision. Absolutely.
Right. Your motion, seconded by Councillor Stevenson, do we need to take a vote on this particular motion first, and then we'll move on to Councillor Hazelwood's motion, and then we'll take it from there?
Excuse me, that's assuming it goes on again in my slide.
Well, no. No, Barry, you know, this panel is a cross-party panel. So we believe in democracy. It's not party politics here. So your motion, seconded by Stevenson.
Can I just make one comment? Yeah, just a procedural matter, just to be clear, if members resolve to not accept the officer recommendation.
We're not on that stage yet.
Well, the motion is to refuse.
Yeah.
Planning permission.
There's another motion as well, which. All right, okay.
If members resolve not to accept the officer recommendation, the normal protocol, which we would follow in this instance, is to bring a report back to a future plans panel, drafting out reasons for refusal based on the members' concerns, which would then be for members to agree or otherwise, just to be clear on the process, as it were.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are we still on?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to repeat your motion again, and then in case anybody has missed? Do you want to switch your mic on first, Barry, please?
That we refuse this application on grounds of sustainability policy, particularly transport, non-compliance with paragraph 84 of the NPPF, non-compliance with chapter 9 of the NPPF, the ongoing drainage problems that we potentially may have, the non-clarity on the footpath, and also lack of evidence that it can be used by anyone with a disability of any shape nor form. It's non-compliant with policy BE2 of the neighbourhood plan, and also potential highway safety grounds as well.
Seconded by Ryan. All in favour of motion Barry just put in? Anyone against? Okay, so
I'm a Democrat.
Absolutely. Councillor Hazelwood, you want to put your motion in, please?
Well, yeah, I've not written a motion out, but I am proposing that we defer this, because we're not proposing to change the planning application. We are saying that we want the additional information that I think a lot of us have asked for already. There's highways information, there's drainage information, Yorkshire Water, to go out on site. So I think I don't have, there's quite a lot there to round up, so I don't have anything written down. But I think, yeah, I propose that we defer this application, collect that information, bring it back to panel, and then we can make a more informed decision at that point.
Want to second that?
I second that.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried. Yeah, right.
To do a quick summary.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm then that members have deferred consideration of the application for further information, primarily to come back on issues relating to highways, and within that include the footpath issue and matters of drainage. We'll also, with panel's permission, look at this issue about disability access, because that falls within that footpath access, and access to disability access to the units as well. And was there something I missed, Councillor Jenkins?
Yes.
Can I just suggest that there's better consultation takes place, or some consultation?
Yes. That was one of the issues. Yeah, sorry, I told you I hadn't written them on.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I mean, we had a good debate, and there are some issues which obviously definitely need addressing. I mean, it's the first time I think I've been to Walton Village, and it's absolutely a nice place to be, and the residents are are absolutely right to show some of the concerns, and some of these issues should have been addressed many, many years ago, which I am quite surprised where people live in this village. But yes, having a good debate, learning about the different community issues is something that I always welcome. So we move on to item 8, which is the time and the date of the next meeting, which will be Thursday, the 29th of June here at 1:30. So thank you very much for your time. Have a safe journey.